This is Justice Worriers, a podcast where we think about things that are right and wrong in our world and how Christian ideas can help us respond to them. We prefer hard questions over easy answers, and we'd love you to join us in our ramblings. Listen in and contact us using the links in the show notes. Hello and welcome to Justice Warriors episode 74. My name's Andy and as usual I'm joined by Leah. Say hi, Leah.
Hi there.
And Jörg. Say hi, Jörg.
Hello.
And today we are going to talk about the word chosen, or the idea of being chosen. And this is really inspired by Leah, you having thoughts. So can we hear some of your thoughts, please?
Yeah, I had some thoughts. Hopefully fairly vaguely interesting thoughts. So it was a couple of conversations and things I kind of heard in the Christian sphere. One was a conversation with a guy who had a really lovely and amazing story of how he'd become a Christian, and God had really met him in a very sort of specific time in his life when he was really struggling, and it was a lovely story. But he was very concerned about his son, who, whilst lots of the good things seemed to be going on in his life, he hadn't ever kind of come into a relationship with Jesus, and I guess around this same time I was just hearing a few other things about being chosen and kind of being called, and then another story about somebody who was who had alcoholism, and God very much met this person and turned their life around. And I guess I thought it sort of set me thinking, really. It's very lovely when you hear these stories and really amazing. But yet, what about the unchosen? Like, so often other people get to absolute rock bottom or desperation status, and God doesn't meet them. And how do we reconcile that with anything? So I was thinking about sort of this idea of the unchosen, really, and what that might mean, and how we love these stories, which are wonderful, but they're not the full story.
Well, and then there's the biblical unchosen, who were once chosen and then fell out of favor. You know, your Saul character, chosen by Samuel under God's prompting to be the king of Israel, and then he did a few things wrong, and then it was all undone and fell out of God's favor. Interesting stories there too. Do we think that this is how it works, though?
I mean, what is this? Like, what is even the theory that we're debating?
What does it mean to be chosen by God? Is that a thing? The Bible does seem to talk about it.
But what do we mean by that is what I'm getting at. Like, does it mean that we get to go to heaven, or?
Yeah, a lot of people would see it as we get to go to heaven, which makes it even more problematic, doesn't it? Maybe if you, that's kind of the trickiest version of it to really get your head around for me. If these are the people that get to go to heaven.
Yeah. So the idea behind this is God isn't equal or interested in equality. He doesn't love everybody the same. And you can either have this for salvation, and we can talk about why that is, because, I mean, that comes out of the particular radicalization of the Reformation idea of grace alone. So you got the ones who are chosen for heaven, and those chosen for hell, like the whole idea of double predestination. And then you have the softer version, even among Arminian Christians who believe, free will, you choose God, God doesn't choose you, everybody's called. You just kind of have to say yes to this grace. Even there is somehow this idea that God loves some people more than others, so he chooses some to be healed. He has plans for everybody. And if you're not being healed, then that must be his plan for you. Or when I was much younger, there was a teenager in our church who died. very tragically in a family that had already seen lots of deaths, and then people started saying, well, maybe God saved this person from making a big slip up later in life, like chosen to go to heaven earlier. It's like this kind of idea that God kind of thinks, okay, how do I direct your life and that person's life? And I think this path's better for you, and this path's better for you. I just think that's so odd. And so there's that. There's the predestination thing. Then there's this idea that God kind of personally tailors our stories to us. And then there's the biblical idea of chosenness of the people of Israel, that then Christians write themselves into and retell that story in what we call supersessionism, that we kind of supersede the people of Israel, and now it's Christians who have God's favor. So there's a special tribe on earth that is God's. So these are three really difficult stories, all three of them for me. Which door do we want to go into? Or is there more, maybe?
All of this takes me to the character of God. Right. So, I in my younger years, I encountered some people who are very Calvinist, and someone who was a teacher on a holiday camp that I was on, who said, literally the thing of some people are born to go to hell and some people are born to go to heaven, and our response to that, if we're people born to go to heaven, is to be grateful that we've been spared. And it was always so shocking to me, which I encountered this later in my life as well. In fact, I read a book called Chosen for Good, which was written by the minister of the church I was going to in Nottingham, which made the same argument. And the thing that I can't cope with in that worldview is what that makes God to be like. Like, that say, someone that I love was created by God to have no value and to be destroyed or punished.
But look on the bright side, you'll never have to do street evangelism in that kind of theology.
Yeah. I mean, there are some definite consolations to it. You don't have to, you do evangelism because you were told to, but you have no guilt about whether it works or not.
Well, you might be part of God's secret plan to bring the person home who doesn't yet know that they're chosen, yeah.
Yeah. But you do it out of obedience, yeah.
You don't get out of it, sorry.
The question is, what kind of God does this?
So where this comes from, what I like about the idea, it counteracts this that we choose God, this kind of consumption God that it was a commodity. So humans can say yes or no to God, and this is what I meant earlier. Like, it comes out of radicalization of the Reformation, the idea that it's grace alone, and then the Reformed side kind of says, well, if it's grace alone, then there's absolutely nothing you can do to earn your salvation, not even believe or anything. There's nothing you can do. It's just there. It's not there. And that, of course, then in Calvin's writings leads to this idea of double predestination. And Max Weber later hypothesizes that capitalism comes out of that. By the way, I mean, you've probably heard that theory.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's quite simple. Yeah, exactly. It's two things, right? Drinking and squandering your money away is not like you start looking for signs that you're elect, right? So drinking and squandering your money away is a sure sign that you're not elect, because you don't hang out at the pub or, do these sorts of things if you're elect. And then success becomes a sign of being elect, as well, because you're very good at your calling. And then Weber kind of says, well, that those both become signs of, like, you don't spend your money, you're successful, you got all this money, what are you going to do? You reinvest it. And then success becomes its own kind of machine of reward, and it kind of decouples capitalism from its religious roots and leaves us all in an iron cage of capitalism, he says, in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this is sort of some stuff that I do with my first year students, when they have to read their Max Weber. But I like the sort of counter idea here, right? That we don't choose God. But of course, if you think this through, especially if it's not couched with some sort of kind of eternal, what is it called, universal salvation, that, some people have to live in purgatory for a while, but then they still go into heaven, then it becomes really dark.
It's so dark, and I found myself at that time in a room with someone thinking, I don't share anything with you. Like I didn't say it that coherently to myself at the time, but
right,
like it didn't feel like we were in the same religion or speaking the same language or whatever. Like I just couldn't bear it.
But doesn't this theology radicalize something that is in a lot of Christian theologies of salvation, in that, what about the people who weren't born in the Christian faith and who don't meet an evangelist? And, for some reason, the cards were always just that bit easier for us because we were born into Christianity. There's this kind of sense that we're, of a divine favoritism upon, so you're European Christian, or maybe not just a European anymore. I don't know. It's at least honest in its radicality. It goes all the way. Whereas I think we've retained bits.
Yeah, I think it took me a lot longer to not like the other story, right? Which is about us choosing God. Now I don't like that either.
I mean, what if you put the going to hell bit to one side and have more of a universalist position? Does that make it any more palatable? This idea of being chosen?
Yeah. But then like everyone's chosen or something. Like what's left in the idea of being chosen?
What if some people are chosen in order for God to show something to the rest of the world, or to...
So Hitler was chosen so God could show us the depth of evil.
Oh, that's a dark way to take that. Golly, thanks. I was thinking more the other way, but yeah. No, not your way. the way of showing us what God is like and showing us good stuff.
Yeah.
Like
the way that Jesus was chosen.
Yeah, much more like that.
Yeah, like so if for a second we imagine that God interacts with people and people interact with God, and people have some kind of free will, then the idea that God like has plans for people and stuff like that, and I don't know if plans is the right word, but like the idea that people are a conduit through which goodness breaks out into the world, and that God is behind that and through that, I'm okay with that. That sounds good, right?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
I'm not. Too many things.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
Well, on the one level, theodicy again, if God does intervene in the world this way, and he chooses people to this end, I mean, coming back to my Hitler example, is everything else just down to rebellion? If so, then why does he choose to keep those people alive? Like, does God act on the world or doesn't he, in these kind of very direct ways? That's problem number one. Problem number two is, what do we even mean by choice? Like, the idea that we have a choice doesn't wed up very well with a notion of causality, and that we could talk about, I don't know, it's gotten a lot more complicated to think about causality in the age of quantum physics, but the whole question of like, can I really choose A or B? Because, biochemically, I'm already predetermined to choose one direction in the moment that choice comes around. Like, to what extent is this kind of free will an illusion? So those are the two small problems I'm having with both.
I didn't get the first
choice.
problem. Explain the first problem a bit more?
The first problem is that if we presume that God interacts in the world in such a way that he chooses people toward what they were doing, he chose me to do what I do, he chose you to do what you do, then how come the world looks the way it is? Did he choose Donald Trump to be president of the United States? Did he choose these wars? Does he choose people to die way too young of cancer? Or if he doesn't choose people for bad things, then why does he allow them to happen if he has this kind of power? So there's always a choice, right? I can stop the bad. So if I'm imagining a God that is capable of working in history in this way, that is, I'll grant you, that is the biblical idea of God, then I am at a loss as to how to understand God's goodness. Of course, I can say that's not for us to understand, and that's the easiest way out of this dilemma. But the moment I want to think through it, I don't know. I think this kind of direct God-world interface doesn't work for me. And this is why Christology is so utterly complicated. This is why Jesus says, I don't know what the day or the hour will be. Like there is a real difference between heaven and earth in my theology. Because the moment you do these kind of direct links between heaven and earth, you get into all sorts of trouble to understand where we are.
But it's hard to... You have to chuck out an awful lot of the Bible if you don't think that God intervenes directly in this world.
I mean, you've just given us two completely conversation-stopping points, Jörg. One is there's no interaction between God and the world, and the other is that we don't even really exist as personalities. So why are we even having this conversation?
Oh, well summarized. So,
which is fine, but we're quite early in the podcast.
We're only 20 minutes in. This is a safe space to be, Andy. We will.
So yeah, like taking the first point, our day-to-day experience is of many people's day-to-day experience is of some kind of relationship with God, and a sense of God's interaction with them and affecting them. And also, many people's day-to-day experience, or possibly even all people's day-to-day experience, is of them making choices and being a person in the world. So, if we just grind to a halt because those things don't make sense, if you think about them too much, does it get us very far in dealing with this stuff?
Well, sometimes it helps us discover a new aspect of what we're talking about once we admit that we're having an intellectual problem with the thing we're discovering. So, for example, I mean, when you say people have experiences of encounters with God, I think that's a slightly different thing than to say that God is ordering the world in such a way that he makes sure that you walk certain steps and certain paths, and that it is his choice whether or not somebody gets healed. So,
okay, that's a very specific use of the word choice. Okay, go on, sorry.
Taking out the Almighty God doesn't mean you take out God altogether. You don't take out the fact that there is a temporal nature to this world that isn't yet heaven, that is not his full domain. And you also don't make it impossible to encounter a glimpse of a different world. But I think you take away the idea that everything the way it is perfectly ordained by the Almighty.
So you don't have a problem with the idea of God intervening in a fairly random and sporadic way. You have a problem with the idea that God is kind of setting this whole thing in motion and controls everything. Am I right? My experience of God and what I see in the Bible as well is almost like the defining characteristic of God's working in the world, as that it, from a human perspective, it is entirely random and entirely sporadic. I mean, in the Bible, there's these massive, great big intervening periods of years and years when God just doesn't do any stuff. And as far as the Bible would say. And so it feels like, almost like by definition, it is not this sort of step by step, oh, God gave me this parking space, God inspired me to take this job, God gave me this place in a certain university, or God led me to my future partner, or whatever. That just doesn't ring true at all. I think so that my version of God intervening, whilst weird in its whimsicality and sporadicness, do you have less of an issue with that, or does that still cause you problems?
With a particular caveat, as long as we're not trying to think about the moral character of God, who sometimes does appear to grant people healing or a more benign diagnosis against the expected odds. And then, at the same time, allows children to drown in the sea. Like the question, once you then ask why this intervention and not that. And I'm not trying to come against anybody's theology. I'm trying to explain my own limitations. I have people who I dearly love who live in the world in their thankfulness and can say with their full heart, thank you, God, for this parking spot. And I have no problem with that, as long as it doesn't turn into theology, because then I'm really if I'm trying to think it through, if people say you just have to trust God to do X, Y, Z for you, I'm like, no, you can be thankful that sometimes things turn out well or better than you expected. And that seems to be baked into God's good world, that sometimes things just turn out in a way that you didn't see coming. But if I want to think through this systematically, and you look at the evil that there is in the world, and we don't have to go all the way to the Holocaust. I mean, we can just look around today. We look around all the things we conveniently forget in that theology. Then I have no way of calling God good. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the one bridge I can build from there, is to say, well, what if, much like Jesus' resurrection, we're only seeing God's glimpses and he's not almighty. He cannot break in all the time. He, for whatever reason, has chosen to commit himself to this universe of pain where something might evolve out of something and maybe lead to his time eventually, and where he can break in. Like, if I can rein his power in, I have a good God. If I think he's almighty and just say he just doesn't act, he acts whimsically, then I don't have a good God. And that's the classical theodicy dilemma. You can't have a powerful, like an almighty and a good God at the same time. You're going to only one or the other. In the face of the evil of the world. You can, of course, deny the evil in the world, but there's also theologians try and do that. But that's the absurdist version of this.
Those that die by wearing the badge, they're the chosen ones. Those who died are justified for wearing the badge, they're the chosen ones. They're justified. Those that died, they're the chosen.
And do you think the Bible attempts in some ways to sort that out by these notions of kind of cosmic battle? So there are a number of times, aren't there? You think about Revelation, think about various mentions of, I'm thinking in like the epistles about an angel and something stopped me coming. And is that the Bible's?
Yeah, so my answer to that would be the Bible has absolutely no fixed solution. It's just as bumbly as we are in this conversation. It tries all sorts of things. There's the idea of Israel as chosen nation. So they're the ones who are favored as long as they stay in God's promises. So it's kind of, you do good, you get good kind of idea. That doesn't,
it's like the Proverbs worldview.
There's a Proverbs worldview, but Proverbs actually later, it's even the old prophets, like the early prophets. And you get into Babylon, and then that kind of breaks apart a little bit, because the people who get deported, well, they're the upper classes, maybe it's fine. But that's Israel working through that and saying it's our sin that got us into this exile. But, by the time you get to Rome, that theology doesn't work anymore. You have the dualistic theology. There's the battle of good and evil. You have the sort of personalized problem of that, which is, of course, what Job is about, that, being righteous doesn't coalesce with getting good. And then you have Jesus' story, which is yet another totally different idea of dealing with evil by taking upon yourself and making it visible. And then the hope that you have coming out of that is this ghostly resurrection figure that is an enlightening idea in the minds of many and founds the church. So the Bible doesn't give us any one story about how to reconcile these. It gives us all the different solutions that are still part of our faith that we try to throw at this problem.
So I think we got into this conversation because we were talking about people being chosen by God. So Jörg, I think what you're objecting to is like someone's kind of life was set aside by God for greatness kind of thing. And I wonder whether there's something more about like part of God breaking through into the world is oh man, I'm just like falling apart even as I'm saying it. Like the idea that God kind of guides us towards paths that are good as part of that breaking through into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a way of talking about being chosen for that path or whatever without it being like set in
absolutely
stone.
I would that absolutely, you know, that we're all chosen to sit under the cross and be confronted by our sin. We're all chosen to be in the garden and meet that glimpse of the resurrected one. We're all chosen to be part of the deacons in the church that give out meals to the widows. I mean, that, you know, that universalism, we're all chosen to be part of this coming of kingdom of God. But that's a powerless God, right? That's a God who actually in the very coming to this world chose powerlessness. I mean, this is Philippians 2, right? Even though he came from God, he took it upon himself to be powerless, to be nailed to the cross, to be affixed to this frame so that we might become whole. So it's the God who chooses powerlessness in order to be found, in order to help us to see that we're all chosen to be part of his story. I think that's a much, much more benign theology in my way. And there's actually also an older Jewish type of speculative theology that says actually creation even begins with God denying himself. He denies his all-powerfulness in order to let something emerge next to him. The only problem, you don't have why create at all, but, you know, let's just assume that there is some good in this world. But that's a theology I can get behind, that in that sort of, it's a universal chosenness, it's a chosenness toward a God who has demonstrated that he doesn't have the ability to intervene in this world, and yet has plans for this world, and yet hopes it's going to come to a different end, or who knows where it's going to go, but he doesn't have the ability to intervene temporally while it's still rolling on as a story.
But the problem with that, Jörg, is that I do think that God acts quite miraculously sometimes, and that's why I find that's the hard bit. And the only thing I've been wondering and trying to think about is it this sense that the Bible talks about these things as signs, that as humans we need to have occasional demonstrations of God's power in order for us to kind of keep going and keep believing. And I don't know, this sounds silly now I'm saying it, but all Jesus' miracles are very much pitched in the Gospels as signs to point you towards Jesus' status, and you know, the fact that he, like signs to point to the fact that he was the Son of God. And does that help us a little bit? This sense of some of these miraculous interventions are just because every now and then we need a reminder of how powerful God actually is. But I don't know.
So I'm still thinking about the person you were talking to whose son had good things going on in their life but wasn't a Christian, and who had been miraculously chosen by God themselves. And wondering how what you just said, Leah, links with that. My kind of gut reaction is like, I deny this worldview that essentially getting to heaven or not getting to heaven is this binary thing that's the only thing that matters in the world, and and stuff. And like I won't rant about like not valuing people who have not been chosen. But can we instead see that as a sign has been done in the parent's life, which sheds light for the child in that relationship, without it being about do they cross the line and become saved?
I think it's a utilitarian aspect of that God's sign. Like, I'm doing this now because I've calculated this will happen 23 people to give their life to Jesus, that is the problem here. Because, stand on the pool of Bethesda, and it's great that one person got healed, so Jesus could show that you no longer need to go to the water, and made a great Bible story that we preach about today. And the other 50, 100, 150 people who clambered to get to the water that day, they just weren't part of that story. So if it's that utilitarian, I have issues with it. If I can slightly reframe it and say, for whatever reason, God has chosen, and possibly it has to do with free will, so we'll have to see what we'll find in the other problem. But for whatever reason, God has chosen that we can only have glimpses in this time. He's unable to do more, but these glimpses are important. Sometimes things turn out in other ways. Sometimes love wins, and we can have a sense of another coming kingdom. And by the way, for whatever weird reason, we as humans have a spark in us that wants to see those glimpses, that doesn't want to just eat the other animal because we're stronger. That's a sign of God. That's beautiful, right? But I cannot, this is for some reason, sometimes rays of lights are breaking through the clouds. But that can't be a planned endeavor, or else you're in that whole question of goodness of God again. But more of a structural nature of the way creation story tells that this is a fallen world. It isn't the Garden of Gethsemane. It isn't the Garden of Eden. It doesn't live under God's full grace. It's just that it's held by God's grace, and sometimes those lights break through, and we can hope that in some probably very distant future, there's a greater fullness of this.
You've just done that really annoying academics thing, though. You've just taken the same answer and you've framed it in the two extreme polar opposite ways and said exactly the opposite thing.
Oh, sorry, what?
What do you mean, Leah?
Well, you've taken the same story and you've told it in one extremely pared down utilitarian abstract fashion and made it sound awful. Right. And then you've taken the same story and told it in a romanticized, beautiful way and made it sound wonderful and utterly palatable.
Yeah, but that's to draw the contrast between where that theology becomes quite difficult and where I think there's the kernel of truth in that theology of God. This is why I said, I can live very well with people who see everything as a sign of God until that becomes a systematic theology where they tell me what to expect, right? And I can, and every day I live in utter thankfulness of this world. There is a lot of good to see, but I cannot believe it's planned in every of its details, or even in some details.
No, I don't. No, I don't think there is that kind of planning to it, but I think, I really like the second description. I thought that was great. I'm happy with that. But,
What comes to mind when we're having this type of conversation, because that idea of light sometimes breaking through, right? That feels like it's closer to my experience. When you were talking earlier, Jörg, I was just trying to find a way to fit the sense I have that I have some hope into what you're saying, and I think that describes that. But then the question that comes to my mind then is, what common ground do we share with someone in a church that we go to who is talking in those terms of God's choices being dominating life and describing everything in those terms? And I'd like to throw in there, because I find that type of talk really, really disturbing. And I wonder whether there's any common ground. But then actually when the Old Testament does this, I really like it. Because when it happens in the Old Testament, people are in some sense holding God accountable for the whole mess. And saying, why is it like this? And that, I can definitely get on board with that bit.
The lamentation of it.
But the question is, where's the common ground? Is there any common ground at all?
This is a very difficult one for me personally. Not that I don't have lots of common ground with many brothers and sisters, but I've had to learn for myself that that I had to step away from conversations where this theology becomes too dominating, because I don't know, if you can't say yes to that, you're very quickly seen as a lesser believer. In my own life, this was the place. You know, my earlier faith had some challenges with historical critical theory, but it was actually thinking through theodicy in a paper that was much too delayed that a lot changed, you know, from the young man who believed that, you know, God had a plan for his life and everything worked well, who would, you know, even think, you know, God, what t-shirt do I wear today? Because it could be somebody I witnessed through that slogan on the t-shirt, you know, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just stared into the abyss. I had panic attacks even, that paper wasn't getting done, and I think that was linked, like suddenly the world didn't feel safe anymore. It wasn't all going to work out well. And like serious panic attacks, it took me a long time to rebuild from that. I'd learned a lot about myself in that time. So it goes extremely deep for me. And when you then say, sorry, I don't believe that God did that. I don't believe God gave me that job. It just happened to be lucky. And that's fine. I can still be thankful for it. You are quickly a lesser believer. You are doubtful, you're unthankful. And where it comes from me is somewhere totally different, in that I don't want to feel like I am the loved child and my brothers and sisters who are not as lucky as me, who didn't escape the country that imprisoned them through luck of history, who are trapped in poverty, who got ill long before their time, that somehow God just didn't come through for them. You know, that's where that comes from. And yet in these spaces, it very often gets turned against you as if you somehow thankless and doubtful. So it's one I often struggle with, and it's something I don't have a good answer for, other than to say, let's all agree that we can be thankful that the lights break through every now and then, that there's rays of sunshine.
I think there are sort of two problems when you chat with people who that's their worldview. One is the reaction that Jörg's described, where they kind of take against your version of thinking and kind of make you feel like a less Christian. The other one is where you get worried that you're unsettling people to an extent that they're
100%.
coming across a whole pile of problems that they never thought about. So
because
it's very hard.
Sorry, it's just to say that, like, I had the bandwidth to deal with those panic attacks in that moment for whatever reason, right? For some people, that may be an important security to say, no, God's got this. I know he's got this. And like you said, Andy, this is a great place to be, and also to be able to complain and say, why isn't it coming through yet? So I'm totally with you, Leah. Sorry to interrupt, but that's absolutely it.
No, I think you're right. And I think for those people, maybe God actually does act more miraculously for them because they kind of need it for their faith to be sustained. That's a slightly random thought, but I feel like it's just really hard to have those conversations for both of those reasons, and I end up sort of tending to gloss over them. And I do think there are times when I can point to things that have gone on in my life that feel quite miraculous, so I'm happy to talk about those.
And I'm more likely to push those aside. I can point to things as well where, you know, one thing where I was nearly many years ago, cycling into traffic, and there was this gust of wind that blew me back, and I realized I was about to make a mistake and right in front of a car. And I will push those away. Because for every other cyclist who wasn't so lucky in that moment, right? It just, the moment you think through it, it doesn't work for me. And it kills it as well.
And now you do what they tell you. And now you do what they told you.
I think something that's that I genuinely hadn't thought of when I asked the question about common ground is that I'm quite often shocked how much common ground there is, right? When we talk about our actual experience and we talk about our doubts and confusion, and also just our experience of whatever it is that day, the sense of God not being with us or being with us or whatever. I'm always shocked that not always, but sometimes I'm shocked by how much common ground there is when we connect as humans. Even if we have like profound disagreements about how everything's working.
Yeah, this is why it's better not to touch it, right? This is why I would avoid having a conversation about it. Like if something good happened in my life, say, I don't know, we're going through a move. I know many people will pray through like housing. It's a very stressful thing. And if somebody were to say for me, "Oh, Jörg, I'm so thankful you found a house. We prayed for you," I would simply want to say thank you, and not touch it. Like, why would I? Like,
as opposed to saying, "What do you do that for? What do you think is going to happen?"
Yeah. Why do you think?
What do you think?
Did you all pray for the people in Sudan? Why don't they have housing? Can you not attend? Like this is the kind of thing. Like I don't want to go there because in essence we're thankful for the same thing. We would just articulate that thankfulness differently.
And I also think that there's an instinct. Like there's an instinct to pray for our friends. There's also, by the way, an instinct to think, maybe not God's got this, but like that there needs to be a sense of letting go and trusting in some way, even though everything is uncertain and bad things do happen. And I'm not sure how to get a handle on that.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that there's some kind of childlike attitude that it's hard to balance upon, but it is something that says, I am open today, or in this situation, for the God who I know loves me to act in ways that I might not expect. And that might be that the God who loves me does some amazing thing that blows my mind and stops me falling off my bicycle. Or it might be that the God who loves me lets a ray of sunshine just catch its way through the forest that I'm walking through and just absolutely amaze me with its beauty. Or it might be that a load of really horrible stuff goes on today, and I will believe that God is in that experience and in the pain with me, that is open to all those possible scenarios, that is open to maybe God feeling a million miles away but still believing that God is good. Can we tread that line?
I think my compromise formula here usually would be to say, yes, it's amazing that God has created a world in which all of those things are possible. I'm in my own theology, I'm still minded to keep out the direct intentionality of the moment, but to keep thankfulness that these things are here, that the world is this kind of mixed bag and is sometimes really, really amazing. And good things that you don't expect happen. And I can be thankful for that because I see God's character in this. I see the character of his creation that surprises us, that isn't a probability machine or predictable in a way which a computer might be, that does take weird turns. That's fine. Or indeed, one can go, wouldn't be my theology, but it's possible to say, well, I just don't understand how God acts, and he does these things, and I can be, like you articulated, Leah, I can be thankful when it's tough, and I can be thankful when it's good, and I'll never know the mind of God, and it's just way beyond me, which in essence is Job's solution to it, isn't
it? Are we talking about Job or the writer of Job? Because, I don't know, anyway.
Job in the Bible, the book. That's what I mean.
But I mean, the writer of Job, I think, comes to a different conclusion from Job, potentially.
Okay.
The character.
Walk me through that.
So, like, Job complains and complains and complains, and then God beats his chest, and Job says, "Oh, I'm really sorry, yeah, you were right all along." And the writer, I think, says, God hasn't given us a satisfactory answer here.
Oh, that's why he's got to have his camels back and a second wife. And also more children at the end.
I mean, yeah, none of that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's most likely an addition, or I would think that makes sense in the story. But the enigmatic nature of God, I think that would be the sort of core of the solution. Like, I'm not accountable to you, you will never get it. Like, what do you understand?
You don't get how hard it was for me.
Yes.
I was wondering about this common ground thing and thinking, is there a common ground between someone who sees everything as choices by God and every person as chosen or not chosen by God, and someone who struggles with all of that? And I was thinking that sometimes the effect on us of good thinking is similar, right? So someone might say, today I'm going to go with the flow because God has got this. And someone else might say, today I'm going to go with the flow because I understand I have no control. And anything could happen. And I'm not achieving anything by pretending I'm in control. And both of those people would probably have a better day, or maybe something more profound than that.
Yeah.
And so
I was thinking the same way.
Maybe that's where the common ground is.
Yeah. I was thinking the same way because the whole time of this conversation, like the last 5 minutes, I've been thinking actually this has a lot to do with the other ship sinking problem you accused me of, the whole idea of free will. I don't know. I mean, even our subjectivities, so much of it is an effect of what we're connected to. And, to what extent are we just watching the story, a little bit like the Slaughterhouse-Five idea, right? We're just there. I know we've mentioned this in a previous podcast as well. Are we just watching the play? And we can learn from it. It's an interesting play to watch sometimes. It's a horrible play to watch other times. But the idea that we can figure out the causality of it, that we are in control, that we have free choice, is important for accountability, but is it true?
I mean, is there any point spending any time wondering that?
I don't know. That's how you discover sometimes there isn't, but sometimes there is something to see.
But would you agree that sometimes there is a moral choice to be made and there is a right and a wrong choice to have made in that situation? So surely what matters is not whether free will is an illusion or not. It's whether, and doesn't really, maybe it doesn't matter what you think about all this chosen and not just chosen and whatever. Isn't the issue what do we do in those moral choices when there obviously there are a lot of moral choices where there's ambiguity, but that is not all moral choices. There are some moral choices where there is pretty clear right and wrong. Isn't the important thing what we do in those situations?
Yes, absolutely. There is right and wrong in every choice. But have you ever faced a choice in your own life, Leah, where it was that clear cut? Because then it's not really a choice. If there is an absolute wrong,
I'm not saying it has to be totally clear cut. I'm just saying a choice where on the balance of right and wrong, there's a way that is.
And no, I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's lots of choices that lead to absolute disastrous results, and they're morally wrong. Dead on wrong. And yet, when you then walk through the causality of why, let's say, a perpetrator did them, you discover all sorts of reasons for why that seemed right to them in that moment and how they got there.
Yeah.
And then you see a much, much deeper complicity, fallenness, sin, guilt that involves maybe their abusive parents, the system around them, all sorts of things, right? So the idea that here's a person who had a choice in that moment, and out of the evil of their own private hearts, they went one way, is, I think, the thing that is illusory about it and shields us from the inside. Actually, we've made that person. Our fallenness goes deeper, and the moral, while we have very clear moral vision and need to have it and have very clear moral pronunciation, we can end up in the wrong places for all sorts of wrong reasons. And I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's yeah.
Some of those that work forces.
And maybe actually the thing that you're highlighting now is something that's been bothering me through the conversation, is that we always, because of where we're brought up and the way we're taught to think, we're all coming at this from a very individualistic lens. So it's all of our conversation has been about me as an individual and how God interacts, or I interact with God as an individual. And the same thing, you're saying the same thing now. You know, the illusion is perhaps not so much one of free will, but the illusion of individual. The illusion of being able to be an entirely separate individual is perhaps more of the illusion.
The abstract soul, right? That we're all kind of divorced from the circumstances of our birth, from our biochemistry and everything, and that we have this kind of abstract soul that makes or breaks you. And then you have the kind of free will. It's actually Karl Marx says something similar to this. He says it's actually that no wonder that Protestantism and capitalism go together, because Protestantism has that sort of abstract human being, much like a unit of production, right? And that enables a lot in terms of moral clarity and judging other people. But we know it's not really the story, and we know that our choices are often not that. When people fall into sin, and even when you repent from wrongdoing, it takes you a long time to walk that back and actually come to the realization of this, right? And to understand where you went wrong, because in that moment it didn't look like that. It was maybe just a selfish thing, or like not wanting to think about it or whatever.
I had a really interesting thing about a study they did into, and I think it was particularly, you know me, I'm hazy on detail always. Let's just kind of make this up a little. I think it was in France, and I think it was about the resistance, and I think it was, what was the thing about the people who got involved to help people during the Second World War? So either as part of the resistance or hiding Jews or whatever it was about. And they found that the single factor that more than any other accounted for people doing what we would term as the right thing was being asked to help. So it comes back to not that individual sitting in their bedroom thinking, oh my goodness, these Nazis are terrible, I really need to do something courageous to help out and to do the right thing, because I need to, as this individual sitting here making this rational choice, I need to do the right thing. It was much more about being within a community, that the community required that you did something as a fellow human to help those other humans. And that really struck me as I heard that, which, sorry, I'm sure I've totally butchered that story, but anyway, that was the gist.
That makes a lot of sense. It's our embeddedness, right? Like even our moral judgments are not context free. We'd like to think they are, but we've learned what is good and wrong from our parents. We've learned it through the law. We learn it through religion, and it's just because just relativizing doesn't mean that none of that is true. Truth is what we find it possible to live within as a society.
So are we now turning to an idea of not individuals making choices, but nations making choices, and not individuals who are chosen, but nations or groups who are chosen by God? Does that make any more sense?
I'm just coming back to that idea of, we're obviously taught that we've got to evangelize and we've got to bring other people into this group of chosen people, but actually what Jesus was more telling us to do was to follow him and be with other people who were following him. Mm-hmm. Is it more about being called into a community of followers mm-hmm. of mm-hmm. following Jesus as a guide? I don't know.
And what if God did the same? I've chosen you this way, and I want to be with you as you work out this very long evolutionary path, where it sometimes feels like we don't get very far, where presidents still seem like they're Caligula, the emperor. But that this is actually God's choice, this kind of community that being with us, and then living in those limitations. I mean, I would say that is the story of Jesus, right? Again, coming back to that sort of Christological thing, that as Christians we say when God was fully revealed, it was in that powerless man on the cross.
Yeah, he chose to be with us.
He chose to be with us, and he chose that way of pain to see all of what we go through. And then that is a very different kind of engagement with the world that actually goes right into it, and that doesn't act as if it could just break through and cut the world into a very different shape any moment, much like we're discovering that our idea of free choice is maybe not that abstract. It's always about community. Or am I butchering it there?
God chose the human race and chose to be with us. Like, chose the human race as in chose to be
as
our friends.
As a path, and maybe not even the human race, this universe where planets upon planets sprout up in different times of billions of years, so far apart they can't even talk to one another, and some civilizations make it all the way to the atom bomb and hopefully a little bit further. Some die out by some asteroid a long time before the evolutionary path reaches that. And for some reason, he delights in that. For some reason, it's that universe he chose.
Because this whole story about, God chose me or whatever, it comes from a sense that God is with us, right? Mm. That's what we're struggling to make sense of.
Mm. And in the way we always do it, we center it on ourselves, on our individual accesses. Yeah. Kind of, this is all around me. And that's where we go wrong.
Yeah, I think it's so... I was thinking the other day about how we read the Bible with that lens that you've just described really well. It's me and everything revolves around me. And we forget that it was written to a community, the majority of it's written to communities that had a very different worldview. Mm. And that almost, I don't know, maybe it's going off on a whole different topic, but it feels to me like a lot of the New Testament was the sort of the beginnings of telling people that they could be different to the rest of their community and that they could in some ways step out of it and join this new community. Mm. And so maybe bits of the New Testament overemphasize the individual in order to make it clear that you didn't have to be bound by your biological or your village community, that you could become part of something new. But then we read it with our lens of super individualism, and we latch onto all those bits and kind of make it even more about the individual. I don't know, does that make any sense?
Yeah, well, how many sermons have you heard that go along the lines of, this thing happened to the entire nation of Israel, how can we apply that to ourselves as individuals?
Yes, yes, yes. And can I read you a Bible story? Because that just turned,
Yes,
like
please,
when you were
Uncle
speaking,
Jörg.
Leah, that just turned over in my head. You can tell you why. This is the verse that Calvinists love, and actually, I think, Leah, you've opened up a different interpretation here. All right, so this is in Matthew 22, reading from verse 1. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened calf have been butchered, and everything's ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized the servants, mistreated, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army to destroy those murderers and burnt their city. Then he said to his servant, 'The wedding banquet's ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the streets and street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went out into the street and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, 'How'd you get in here without wedding clothes, friend?' The man was speechless. The king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen.'"
How did Sunday school teachers teach this stuff and not just
I know.
traumatize all the children?
Oh, don't worry, they traumatise me.
Job done.
I think they either traumatized or hardened you, one of the two.
Okay, Jörg, you better reinterpret that quick.
So what I was thinking when Leah was talking, like, we're talking about a wedding here. It's not about the individual. All the people are saying, "I got other things to do." And the guy who gets thrown out is not a good or bad person. It's the person who doesn't have wedding clothes on. It's the one who's not part of the story. He's not looking forward to this. And so the point is, do we open our eyes to the fact that God has made this world with this good stuff breaking through, with these glimpses of kingdom, with somehow us being able to imagine what it would be like without pain, what it would be like without murder, rather than go down this dark Nietzschean route where the strong always wins, right? That's the wedding. And do we go to that? Or do we sit by the sidelines and say, "No, I'm not part of this. This is not the story. It's about me. I don't want to fit into this celebration. I don't want to let the story be told through me." Because that's what you are as a wedding guest. You're garnish. You're there to help the bride and the groom be happy. You're there for their day. And yet we don't want that. So being chosen means to be part of that story, to be, you're invited, but you're only chosen if you are chosen yourself, if you have an attitude of chosenness, in the sense that, wow, it's amazing that I can be alive for these 50, 60, 70, maybe even less than that years, and watch this wedding go on. That's what happened in my head when you were speaking, and I think that's an interpretation of the passage I'd like to keep.
So it's not this idea that you've kind of been chosen out of a bunch of people in order to stand as an individual in your beautifully sanctified relationship with Jesus and be the one out of all those people who gets to go to heaven. That is so far from it. It's that you're told that the community that you're born in, that you lived in, that you feel totally defines you, actually doesn't necessarily define you, that you can become and be part of a different community that isn't defined by whether they were Jew or Greek or slave or free or male or female, but is defined by being in this relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. And you are chosen when you let that happen to you. Like it's...
Yeah.
So, in summary, we, the universe, are chosen by God.
Yeah.
And pay attention because the kingdom of heaven is here.
And we, the cognizant part of the universe, are invited, but not all of us can live in that chosen state because we take ourselves out of it. We don't put on the wedding clothes. We don't want to be part of that story. We'd like to be above it.
So is it about choosing to turn up?
It's about being chosen. It's not choosing. It's about living in the chosenness.
Okay, we better all go do that.
Go to the street corners, invite to the banquet anyone you find.
Including the bad people.
Including the bad people. And the wedding hall was filled with guests.
And here we are.
And the person who got thrown out didn't want to be part of it.
Well, they wanted to come in on their own terms, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they didn't really want to be part of it.
All right. I think we're going to stop there. Thanks a lot, Leah. Thanks a lot, Jörg. Thanks a lot, listener, for listening to what was probably an even more rambling episode than usual. And we'll see you next time.
Killing in the name of. Killing in the name of. Killing in the name of.
You've been listening to Justice Warriors. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also follow us on social media by searching for Justice Warriors, where warrior is spelt like someone who worries about things. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating, since that helps other people find us. Also, please tell your friends about us in real life. We'd love to hear from you. To get in touch, use the email address in the show notes or contact us via the social media links. Thanks for listening.
Now you do what they told you. Now you do what they told you.